There we go. Hello, hello, hello. And welcome to a new Friday. Yes. It's been an interesting year here, or the previous year, starting off starting off fairly strong in 2024 here at Strange Loop Games, and I see the chat is going absolutely freaking crazy with speculation and things on the Twitch side. And for the Twitch chat, Armored is sitting on YouTube, hence why he's not on. He's not there. Yeah, it's a new year, new things happening, and as you can see from the title, and I also have a cat helper here that really likes to be in the zone. We've got 10.1 out of the gate. We've got a few hot fixes out for that. Hopefully people are having a somewhat smooth journey. We have been really trying to break down and make sure that we get as much broken stuff out of the way and kind of get a lot of polish and bug fixes out. And hey, Armored, so you popped over into Twitch as well. So it's been pretty hectic for a lot of the team, but everyone is kind of back in action, going full speed. And today we'll break down a few things that we have planned for 10.2. There's still a few things that we haven't really gotten completed and or in like gameplay introduction phase. So unfortunately, there are some things that I just don't have in-game visuals for, but we'll break down a little bit on what we have planned, what we have in store, and what we're how these things are gonna be looking, and especially in regards to what we're doing with smelting, which is a big topic. And I know someone was commenting early on in the chat here that, oh, but smelting isn't that much of a powerhouse compared to some of the other professions, and that's true. If you're looking at mechanics, for example, which has all the iron goods as hard dependency, unless the smelters deliver and is really up to it and churns out all the different raw materials, then the mechanic isn't going to be able to build any trucks or whichever part. And I think we just kind of switch over to we'll do a bit of a slideshow thing here, with a flowchart of how and I'm kind of just jumping into it immediately. Hi, my name is Jens, working as lead game designer here at Strange Loop. If you haven't seen me before, take a look at some of the other cool stuff that we've shown off in the past. And if you have questions and whatnot about 10 and all the new fancy things and the settlements, pop in on Discord, give a nudge, post a question, and get some assistance from our amazing community that really goes above and beyond, be it by trying to figure things out in the vanilla side, or the modders who are absolutely stellar that tries to fix anything that isn't part of the vanilla, while we trudge along and do things from our side and kind of improve their life. And so what we're looking at here is what we have today in 10.1 or previous eco, where you had smelting as a kind of all-encompassing, does everything with iron, copper, and gold in terms of raw material production into intermediary ingredients, and then ships it off to electronics or whatnot. And then we have advanced smelting that is doing basically the same, but anything that is not basic iron bars. So the steel processing, which is turning iron bars into steel, converting it, as well as creating the steel bar, the rivets out of steel, rebar, pipes, as well as having 2 craftable block sets. And a big problem that we ran into and had a lot of feedback about back and forth and trying to kind of scratch our heads in what we wanted to do with it and then what we could do with it without dumbing it down completely. Yeah, I'll poke in on the whole molds thing, because it as someone was guessing, it does have a mold concept aspect to this that I'm kind of tinkering with. And also leave feedback on Kenny, which probably should have had a link for, but not sure that I'm actually added as moderator on Twitch for the channel. Maybe we have Dennis or someone around that can drop in a link for it. Yeah, when I'm connecting to Twitch, because we're using a kind of a restream thing. The link for the suggestion, Kenny Ninja. Kenny, which is a suggestion / feedback tracker thing that allows you to kind of post suggestions, vote on them, and whatnot. There we go. Thank you. So the colorization is basically purple being the crafting tables. The green are the very high general resellables, as in things that just constantly have a demand for. And then the red is more of a one-off, rare-off circulatory item, where it's, you know, steel saws used for the crafting tables. If there's no need for crafting tables, you know, you're not going to sell more, you're not going to make more steel saws, and so on. The blue being tools, which is going to be moved over. So so this is kind of, you know, where were we going? Added on some notes for like where my thoughts are looking at this. Almost, but close enough. So the big problems we have with it is it has, both of these professions have very, very limited, very remote purchasing power involvement into the general market. And that's something that we significantly wanted to change, because you could do a ridiculous vertical scaling, which is a big concern for a lot of people that play either solo or with very few groups, or, you know, few individuals in their groups. And like having that mining, smelting, advanced smelting, suddenly you could do industry if you wanted to, and just on 4 skill points or specialty points, you could just cover a very, very large volume of the progression spectrum. You'd still have dependencies in things like milling and you know, tailoring and whatnot, but there's very few fractions of involvement in there. Like, there's very few pieces that goes here, a few pieces goes there. They're essential, but it's not a big item transaction in between these two professions. On the contrary, where mining to smelting and smelting to advanced smelting is a very, very large chunk of the gameplay loop, which is something that we're looking and breaking down to be more sensible, but also leave a bit more of an expansionary area for later things as well. Yeah, and advanced smelting also has tier 3, tier 4 block sets as well, while tier 4 revolves in oil drilling for those epoxy involvement. The corrugated steel isn't, so that's basically, you need 3 specialties and you can just do tier 3 building blocks without having to involve anyone else. So that's kind of our starting point, where we really kind of we took a look at it and went like, this is really, really weird compared to what we've done with lumber, for example. It's heavily involved with everything else. Starting to do it a little bit with glassworking, and kind of nudging some of these other auxiliary professions to have more of where, you know, kind of nudging it to be more of a web area and more involvement in the general community. Also, while at the same time still trying to keep enough stuff in these professions to make them a constant work. So a few of the things that kind of we poked on is how can we split these recipes up? Where do we want them to land? What new intermediary ingredients can we be looking at in terms of adding where and how? So a few things that kind of stood out is things like the pipes, which is a really weird thing to have on an anvil, for example. What if we involve smelting into be a more direct casting part, which would allow us to do things like a lesser version of some of the high consuming items for mechanics like gears and so on, which would allow us to do smelting would be more of a transitional thing into mechanics as well by supplementing some of those parts. While still retaining the whole, its focus is on smelting, turning concentrate and ore into usable metals, and separating some of these direct hard craftables out. And that's kind of where the whole color coding thing broke down into, to make sure that we always have something in the professions that are a constant need consumable item that you can constantly have as revenue source in between and being able to export and constantly make money in this profession, while taking out some of the pieces that may not be necessary and leaving them into. So I started breaking this up into a more shifting things around a little bit. Now the extruder isn't done yet, which is why I haven't included it for the pipes. So smelting will be doing things on the extruder for that. Same thing for like this thing here. That one and that one would go on the extruder. Same thing for the rebar. So I wanted to keep... So looking at blacksmithing, it immediately made it really evident to and kind of tricky to see where this kind of constant sale thing was going to be happening. Because suddenly, you have a bank, you're going to be making like 2 or 3 of those. You've got the mint, maybe, if it goes really crazy, you have that, a few towns may have different currencies, but mainly you generally just see like a global currency or some rival currencies, and then it goes into that. Same thing with like decoratives and housing. You can only make so many, which is a big flaw at the moment that we're looking at. We've been speculating a little bit about like maintenance and being able to add that constant economy revolving aspect of it and just have that durability drain, which, replacement of things. So the two things in blacksmithing that really kind of had to happen was, one, tools being a given, because one, I'm not really a fan of how much tools we have all over the place in different areas with very odd kind of specialties for it. Like advanced smelting does things and then regular smelting does things, but none of them are really kind of focused into actual crafting, hence why this kind of felt like a good area to explore and see how it worked. So nails for lumber kind of falls off as well, and that's also a good point. Like the iron wheels are made by basic engineering at the moment. It could be a blacksmithing thing. Depends a little bit. I was also tinkering with the idea of smelting having casting tool heads, which would basically be just a consumable for the blacksmith to as an intermediary to do tools with. Yeah, and the whole idea of repair and recycle has also been a big thing that haven't really decided on, but I'm looking into whether or not we do want to do whetstones to allow kind of everyone to repair things, but have that availability. So you don't have to constantly visit the blacksmith to get your repairs up. So there's kind of a back and forth there. Now, on these two, now looking at what's left in these professions once that's cut out, you are looking at a very glaring problem, because contrary to where we are now, where a smeltery has a need for planks because of the tools, it has a need for lumber because of some of the craftables, and the same thing for advanced smelting has a need for some of the other materials, like fiberglass is necessary for the tools and so on. Glass is needed for some of the signs and whatnot. Once all of that is kind of cut out, that purchasing power is ending up with the blacksmithing. So suddenly blacksmithing has all of these cool dependencies to everywhere and kind of webbed around. However, the actual direct smelting had even less of a general market impact in terms of what they needed. So herein came like the general notion that we've been poking at in chat, is the whole idea of casts. And we experimented a little bit with them in terms of the lumber, or the wooden molds for the bricks. And I know it's a little bit of a 50-50 in whether or not we want to have them completely hard consumed on use, which is contrary to like the barrels for oil drilling, which we also were looking into increasing volumetric craftables with. It's been like multiplied by 10 or something, so you craft more barrels in one go just to reduce the amount of general interactability. The alternative is just making it cost more and then have a much higher yield on things like plastic and so on, but have the craftable time a lot longer. That is actually a good question. Curious, like no one takes smelting that doesn't already take mining. Is it actually useful to make an additional star skill that they'd have to take for the same jobs? Yes and no. One, it would require you to spend an additional star to consolidate your foundation of what you're crafting and where you're at. And it directly inhibits you from being able to do all of it, basically. And it broadens out the spectrum of both the early game as well as into the mid game. Like you can't just cover the entire progression line that deals with that. And armored stone, that's actually also a very good thing, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. So as we can see, we have no dependencies, everything's sort of gone. So the molds are a thing, and we do have a sneaky asset, and I think I enabled it, and when I restarted the server, let me just see if I think it's pottery table. Yeah. So we have this thing that have been kind of creeping around the project. It doesn't have an icon yet, but it's a thing. So and then I forgot to add the crafting component on it. But yeah, so basically what we wanted to do was one of the resources that you really get embedded in and just drowning in early on is clay. And a fairly simplistic way to make cast molds is things like clay / sand as a base. And we see the pot scares me. We see this in a lot of really large scale metal works today, where they have basically a sand clay mold in the ground to cast like big ship cogs and whatnot into, instead of having like this big bulky machinery above ground and having to kind of figure around. Clay felt like a really good way to, one, use add a rocker box recipe. Oh, for turning dirt into clay and sand. Maybe we'll see. Because we still don't want like total resource conversion back and forth, up and down. But it, you know, all of those things kind of float around in my head constantly. Unfortunately, can't get them out of there. So here's kind of where my caution comes in, where and as Blastinus points out, would this make pottery into an earlier specialty? And I don't like that idea per se, because of we kind of start shifting more and more specialties into just like tier 1, tier 2. However, what I was thinking of doing is do a little bit of what we have with the hewn mortar going on right now. Like, you would have a horrible recipe for it, in lack of a better term, and kind of, you know, really driving the point. Having a bad / horrible recipe for making brick molds or clay molds for casting with clay early on in like the workbench, and then have pottery be able to do this in a pottery table. So you have basically a tier 1, tier 2 kind of recipe for it, where one is affected by the module upgrades and one isn't, to revolve around sand or clay depending on. And then we can start using this thing, as well as the art team is also looking at like doing a whole bunch of more decoratives and vases and everything else. And it will allow us to kind of split off some of the recipes from the kiln as well, to drop it on this table instead, which would allow us to do things like modular requirements in rooms. Like, you have certain recipes that require a kiln, and that's also what we'll be looking at in the metal workshop as well. Glassworks really need an economy reusable as well. Yes, and we'll go in on that a little bit here as well, because I have something in mind that I think people might like. Shale brick recipe should be a crushed iron ore recipe for bricks. Not a bad idea. Some other brick variation recipes might not be completely alien. So yeah, so casting will require the molds into it, and I think I changed. Yeah, so I just kind of threw them in a static right now. Still debatable. Drop in suggestions on what you'd like to see. If you want the clay molds to, or the cast molds, I just named them clay molds because brain freeze when I wrote it up earlier. If you'd like to see them to behave like the wooden molds, in terms of static versus dynamic, as well as refund versus no refund. Refund means it'll reduce the amount consumable required as you'd get stuff back. However, it also adds more inventory complication. And, you know, just drop messages out and discuss it, point it. Taste it a little bit and see what you feel. So much hinges on pottery already when moving to tier 2, making bars behind it seems silly. That was also a concern. However, there is also it's also kind of a weird transitional phase where you get into kind of mid-game. Bricks get super heavily used, and then you move out of mid-game and go into late game. Then you suddenly, no one cares about bricks, no one wants bricks, no one makes bricks, and it's like pottery just completely falls off. Hence why I kind of wanted it to be that. Now, here's a curveball. I was wondering whether or not it seemed sensible to have Gathering make the initial recipe for it. So if you had the crappy recipe, would be something that gatherers can do. Or if it's something that we wanted anyone to be able to do, which then brings back to why would the smelters bother with getting anything else, but stick it to gatherers, which would then bring them around into it, and then alleviate the pottery a bit, and see where it lands out. So there's a few things there that might change as we get this into playtesting as well. So, you know, things may not be what, you know, may not result in what I kind of blabber out at the moment. As tweaks happen, we might revise and go like, hey, you know, this sounded like a good idea, but now that we see it in practicality, it was absolutely horrific. Gatherers already have a problem in late game where they don't really interact with the economy beyond the tier 1 and or tractors, so adding more stuff for them to earn is counterproductive at best. That sounds like prefatory. That I'm confused about that statement. Yeah, and that's also kind of a something that I was looking onto Pondo as well, in case of like, what if we make the molds from Pottery being a thing related to just the steel stuff, and then have like, I don't know, a primitive type of for iron, or, you know, not have molds for one or the other. Green sand. Yeah. In our rounds, the farmers doesn't really need to invest once they have mills and tractors, so they just keep on earning and earning without having to spend more. That is a true fact. And the main reason for that is because of the whole, as we were talking about with the whole maintenance thing. Like, you don't have a reoccurring cost and an investment, which then means that certain professions ends up, like the grassroots professions ends up in a state of, I never have to worry about buying anything from anyone, and I can just keep earning money. And that's something that we definitely are looking into and breaking into. Because part of the intention behind like durability and things for the tractors and whatnot is to add that cost to farmers in some way. And then I see there's a very interesting kind of opposite camp going on here now, with like farmers who commented on doesn't make money, and then on the other hand is farmers only make money, they have no, you know, they have no cost. So there, you know, there's a lot of room for experimentation here in terms of how this recipe explicitly will be looking at who wool can be crafting it, and that's kind of what I'll be doing and breaking down into more analytically by towards the week here, and hopefully have everything in a PR early in the week to kind of get stuff tested and into so people can poke at it if they want to on staging and playtest branches. So what are these things going to be looking at? We talked about the general tech tree. We talked about the general functionality for them and kind of the headspace as to where and why we're doing the changes. But what are they going to actually look like? We have first off, we have a stage off for the blacksmithing table, and here we are, the art team is starting to really break down into refining the assets to make sure that we have LODs for them. We have all the gizmos, as well as a lot of optimization going into how these are being made. So, you know, completely new tech behind this asset in a lot of cases. It's sharing more texture with other stuff. My concern is that advanced smelting will become kind of a boring job like oil drilling and farming. Yeah, so it'll be more sensible once some of these other things are going in, because part of the idea is that you need more kind of expand more stuff in a workshop and so on. Like smelting will require extrusion and like higher tier rooms to be able to do all the things necessary for them. Blacksmiths use forges. Yes, we already have, like, for the actual smelting part, and like, since we don't really have a reheat, you know, a hot bar, put a bar into a fire and then take it out to actually work on it and have like the state change of them. We already have the bloomery that is kind of representative of this. So someone that is doing the whole piece of blacksmithing and smelting and whatnot would have all of these accessories around them. So this is sort of already kind of representative for that. And as for why is this in wood? Well, we are looking into some prospects of the upgrade module system. So, you know, the whole basic upgrade, advanced upgrade, modern upgrade. And some of the ideas behind doing this is be able to change out the visuals of the object when you're actually upgrading it. So an object could be, you know, very rudimentary basic wood like here, and then you drop in a basic upgrade and it gets like a metal tabletop, and you drop down an advanced upgrade or so on, and it would get a whole bunch of new tools or, you know, other changes visually to it, so you can reflectively see what's going on with it. Hence why we're sort of approaching world objects a little bit differently than what we used to do. So there's a few things that's being experimented in the background, art tech wise and so on. So, you know, stay tuned for that. And then we have currently untextured. Milenko is the mastermind behind a mechanically forced driven power hammer. So this is what you will be looking at in the mechanic era and transitioning over into steel production. So this is moving all the general steel associated recipes from the anvil to being like a steel version of the anvil. So this thing has, it's currently being rigged up. It has a whole bunch of animations and everything. It looked really cool. And hopefully it'll be done fairly shortly. This thing is mechanically powered. And that's also kind of into the whole upgrade system. We are looking at whether or not we can't just kind of switch the power layer on upgrades as well. So if you drop in, say, an advanced upgrade, it'll bump up and stop being mechanically powered to being electrically powered and so on. So there's some back-end things there that we're looking into. And then we have something that I haven't mentioned earlier. It's potentially not making it into 10.2. It depends a little bit on workload for art team, as well as kind of rigging it up in Unity and sorting all of that out. But we have in mind to completely move all the bows and everything off the like the anvil and all of that, like to make Fletchery into its own thing. This would go into hunting tech tree. So this would be something that the hunters are producing and maintaining for other people. And then we have the the grinding stone, which would be kind of where we shift over repairs to. Oh yeah, the whole multiple different arrows to do things is something that is something that we're looking into, because it would help and do a lot of things to boost that whole part, and it would allow us to balance damage a lot better. What we got here? Oh yeah, the whole wireless mechanical power thing. Yeah, we have. It's been a topic back and forth a few times internally in if we don't want physically connected mechanics in, you know, kind of like oh god, what's the name on it? Timber thingy. And yeah, like Create or so on, that where you would have physically connected mechanical power, where, you know, you'd actually place the blocks to force that mechanical power to happen, and or just like as a transmission thing. And it's tricky because there's a few objects that doesn't really make sense in terms of how they look, how they interact, and the style for eco. Yeah, Timberborn, that was what I was looking for. Because like mechanical power gets really bulky really quickly, and it's hard to build anything that kind of looks nice without making it 20 times larger than it needs to be. Or you build something really weird just to kind of hide this, you know, the so-called mechanical cables away. And so tagging it onto the whole wireless thing was something that was sort of a compromise in terms of trying to keep it visually attractive while also kind of making sense for an energy consumption to happen. What's the plan for the grindstone? You guys changing out how durability works? Would be interested to see tools instead of just being either good or broken, go from pristine, sharp, worn, dull, chipped. Yep, prefix suffixes is always difficult, and it's not something that really would, not gonna say work, but something that would be very strange in eco in terms of displaying the property somehow. That said, it is possible to do something like every time, like when you repair it, it lowers the maximum durability. So you would have a constant drain of tools because they would just never be pristinely repaired every time you repair it. Yeah, something in that line, something in those lines, because there's a lot of survival games that's gone that route, and I kind of like it because it has that constant replacement need. As for the general modules things, one of the thoughts that I have on doing is just scrapping the 1 to 4 values for them and just have basic, advanced, and modern across, and then you would just have each of those in every table. But that is, you know, further down the line, 10 point something in the future. Pottery requiring advanced upgrades is a huge drain on players doing it. Most potters seems to quit really fast. Yeah, I don't know if that's just because all they do is just like, you know, a single building block, and they just, you know, don't have any more work tables. And this is once again sort of into why we're breaking some of these things up, especially the ones that have really, really high volumes of recipes over very small crafting tables. It's easier to make reinforced over bricks, to be honest. Yeah, reinforced is also kind of a whatnot. Basic upgrade suffers from not having modules for the research table. You get that too. It is interesting though, because it brings into the whole like tier 2 tier 3 transition is just way too fast, and it's something that I'd like to look at in terms of like you get yeah, tier 4 is let's not even go there. I was about to say, but it's not necessarily to make progression slower. It's just to have more stuff in between and make research make sense in between those sections. Like tier 1 to tier 2, you have a transition time of, you know, roughly 5 days, give or take, like up to a week, depending a little bit on what the server is looking like, what the collaboration is, the quantity of active players. Because as far as I've seen across the board, you have sort of if you have too few players, it takes too long to progress. And then you have that kind of sweet spot. The server settings are tuned to have the appropriate amount of people on a server that's adequately sized in you know, volume, so it's not small enough to be annoyingly, you know, surrounding, while not big enough to cause a hurdle with very, very long and frustrating transport time. But then you have that, once you go past that and you go into an even larger quantity of population, the progression kind of halts off, because you have more people that wants the same basic materials that's required to progress. Or you have the opposite effect of everything everyone is doing is going straight into progression, so you speed up very quickly, but people don't have any materials to build with, get bored and drop out because of that. And we see this on, I mean, we've seen this on Tiger quite a few times as well, or the White Tiger official server, where as long as you have kind of a functioning government that just like subsidizes stuff that people think are less attractive, or kind of steer the ship of progression and making progression not speed out of control, and so on. And then you kind of get into a point where either the server will have infinite amount of building materials because they progressed so quickly, they got up to that, as mentioned in the chat, you get up to that late tier and you have excavators and skid steers, and suddenly, you know, you lose the need for 90% of the people just because no one needs to upgrade. And that's a big chunk of why I want to look and kind of change out how the upgrade modules work and requires, because it's an innate problem of like carpentry as a profession. It never needs anything higher than tier 1. Where, you know, you just need a tier 1 house for your carpentry table, and you know that's it. You never have to do anything else. Why would you care to stick around if you don't have a benefit of or a need to upgrade? Say if you're doing some basic, you skill up and you know, you join a server, you hop in, you do some basic stuff, and like it's 80% of the population on the server just doesn't seem to have a need to upgrade, which is because they just do the bare minimum to fit their work tables. So a few things that we are looking into is have more auxiliary furniture to do things like to have like recipes locked in behind different types of furniture that will benefit, upgrade, and ambient the room up kind of force people to need a workshop, and so on, to kind of bump that. Mechanics and industry is a good example on this, because we have the basic general table, which is the machinist table or the electric machinist table for the industry, and we have all of these other kind of utility crafting tables that it has, which bumps the volume scaling for the room. So you need to have this big workshop to fit the rooms and so on. And it's something that I'd like to see more for the general professions, which is why it's one of the things for the blacksmithing that it kind of had to have at least 3 tables to make sense, to be more utilitarian in purpose of what it's interacting with, bumping in between the two. And yeah, the chat is going absolutely crazy. I love it. But it's bringing life into the profession and expanding the things you need for that profession that really keeps the economy going on the server. Because at the end of the day, unless you have a need to upgrade, people are generally not going to upgrade. That's just a matter of fact. Unless they, creatively want to upgrade because they like the style of this particular building material and so on. Or, they want to build a fancy workshop, factory building, or a cool looking, aesthetically pleasing sales room and so on. So, where do we go from design point of view into helping players do that without arbitrarily just slap on, you can't just use this. You're gonna need to have workshop 3 table in there to use these last 3 recipes, and that requires a tier 4 room. But something that would progressively help you along the way and be kind of a carrot rather than beat you in submission for not upgrading. Maybe folks can have a leisure item that provides a better passive experience when they're relaxing, aka offline. It's an interesting idea. Needs to be reasons to upgrade tier / food that isn't just XP. It's a long list of things that just difficult to solve subjects, because it's kind of we had a discussion on this internally here the other day with why don't we see any super hardcore mods for eco? Like where if you compare to like Minecraft and whatnot, you can see all these like super ridiculously difficultly increasing ones, and we can also see that binary, the whole mining thing, or refining thing. No, but like something that would introduce like more health related things, like penalize movement speed, or crazy amount of like foods things that is kind of necessary to survive, or you'll quote unquote die. And I kind of had a hard time to put kind of finger on why in general, and without kind of going too much into depth, from what I see, and from what I can tell, is a lot of times the servers generally die on basically 3 principles. And that's the primary one is they have a goal set for them when they join a server. And this is not counting new players or people that don't know what they get into when they jump into like a super modded server, or whatever else is and so on and so forth. They set a goal for themselves of for things like I want to be the first mechanic, or I want to be the best guy doing all the furniture and housing for tailoring and carpentry, and so on, or I want to be the person that just researches everything. Yeah, we had a big discussion on it, and I'd rather have rewards over just like outright punishments, and it's kind of bringing into it. So when a player is feeling like I can't achieve my goal, they would rather opt to quit and hop in on a new server and restart and try the same goal again. Because then, you know, new server, new population, other area, I might have a better chance at doing what I wanted to do here. And that kind of makes it into like the mid-game point being kind of a very big tipping point for a lot of people. And yeah, it's people do focus on being first or the only guy in this profession and so on. Which is really hard. Like if you have 15 people joining server and they all want to be the best carpenter, then you know the 14 people are gonna get disappointed. And it's very difficult to do any kind of balancing or like artificial implementation of features from our side to counter this in a lot of ways. Because and as Ellery is pointing out, like because the first person gets all the profit, it's very partially true. Yeah, you have a 93.3% chance of being disappointed. And I mean, I've seen this on first hand when I've been playing. But I've also seen a lot of cases where the first guy who does it and the top dog that does it gets absolutely burnt out because everyone is on his case of I need this, I need that, I need so and so. And then he feels like he has to play for like 16 hours straight just to help everyone get supplied with everything. And then they get burned out and they leave, and suddenly you don't have that mechanic anymore. Or, you know, that carpenter just ups and vanishes because they just get sick of people, you know, constantly hammering them about things. And then they disappear, and then half the server dies off because suddenly no one can get mechanical goods and no one has a specialty point to spare to pick mechanics. Which is kind of another subject of why we're doing some of these breakups in professions, and why for me in specifically it's important to make sure that all professions have these recyclable items and these constant consumption items, at least in some manner. And with breaking this up, we can also do new cool things with the perks, which has been a big thing that's overall kind of neglected for a longer period of time. Once I'm done with this, with the blacksmithing thing, I'll be taking a look at the malfunctioning perk at the moment, which I believe is Power Shot. Someone was saying that it kind of doesn't really work properly. And some of the ones that are kind of lacking interest, which is the logging perk, obviously. Kind of things that just wraps this up a little bit more. But with a more specialized part for the whole workflow thing is something that I generally dislike. So when the perks got made initially, which was prior to me joining, as the whole skill system was done in like 8.0, there was plans for a lot of more dynamic things, but due to time constraints and kind of deprioritization, a lot of the talents just got copy-pasted perks, which is why you have the whole workflow perks for level 3 on like everything, even stuff that didn't even have craftables. So that's parts that I'm looking at in particular now. And for things like smelting, we can do stuff like specializing in, instead of you doing like everything is upgraded X or Z, and that's something that I believe binary. I talked to some of the guys in the modding side about it, and like for smelting, for example, we can have the level 3 perk be either improve your kind of stumbling on words here, improve your efficiency with smelting iron bars versus improving your efficiency with smelting gold and copper bars. Just as a kind of breaking things up in between, like in the path of the professions themselves. So even two smelters could have vastly different prices, which wouldn't fix the general issue of, oh, but one smelter can supply the whole world, or one mechanic can do everything. But it does look at general pathways for splitting the professions in general. Yeah, Armored, I know you hate any kind of benefit. And there's also some interesting parties in terms of doing actual recipe unlocks that way as well. So you would have, I floated out some images a while ago with things like baking, for example, where you could have a sub-specialty of like pastry versus like sustenance food, or like meat pies or whatnot. So you could have actual hard set limitations in some of these things, which would directly make, two cooks could have completely different recipes, which would then lead to, you might need to have 2 or 3 or 4 chefs just to have access to all the recipes there is, which would start to mitigate some of the damage the whole kind of overproduction to one end is causing. Yeah, the chat's going absolutely nuts. I love it. It's super active. Would certainly help in creating settlement character, like certain biome town could specialize into being main exporter of certain goods. Why did you guys get rid of the original skill point system with the branching skill trees? There was a few. The problem with a large part of it is because it tied in. It basically did what the character level up is doing together with the specialty level up is doing, but at a set time rate. And actually, I went over and back and rewatched some of the dev blogs for the specialty stuff and kind of the level ups, as well as kind of reading through the design docs and everything we had back from that when I was looking at the perks. And the general problem we had there, and I was completely guilty of this as well, was basically you earned skill points the same way you do specialty stars now. Which means this also transferred into the level up you were in that profession. Which resulted in you hopped in on the game, you ate the best food you could possibly do, and then you logged off, and then you just logged in 10 minutes every day, just ate food, because you didn't want to play the game until you had maxed out your efficiency of that profession, which was just by inputting skill points. So that was split into the specialty stars, which allows you to unlock the profession, and then you actually have to do stuff in the profession as a separate experience gain. That's kind of where the start of why it was split between like specialty stars versus the whole thing. And it's in kind of a rudimentary form just because it felt like we needed to keep a simplicity part of it, so we didn't go super crazy in terms of complexity, because while eco does really well in role-playing, it's not a direct like RPG kind of thing, so keeping sort of a depth enough into it without going all too crazy into it. Chat is going absolutely crazy. I need to just read through this quickly and see what's going on here. Meta strategy. Yeah. Late in the oil drilling profession, why make biodiesel when you have an oil drilling setup? Biodiesel and all of that is kind of tying into pollution. We do have kind of a goal to change out pollution to be based on the fuel sourcing. So you would have dirty fuels versus cleaner fuels and so on. So directly using a more expensive fuel like biodiesel compared to petroleum or gasoline would have a direct effect of that. But it's stuff that's still kind of on side burn at the moment. Will the smithing profession add any new items / mechanics, or be comprised of just things taken out of smelting? Yeah, so there are a few new intermediaries that I'm looking at how and where they'd fit in. Part of it is, as was discussed earlier, with the whole like repairs, like changing out if we'd want to do like repair, instead of just having like iron bars or steel bars and so on as repair consumables, do an actual export capacity for like whetstones and repair kits of different types that would allow any user to be able to repair everything on the go, instead of having to kind of resell things constantly to be able to do that. So there's a couple of things that are still being experimented on and not set. But on the subject of yeah, I like the whetstone mod. It's neat. And there are a vast majority of mods in there that is just crazily good in a lot of ways. Either by improving quality of life, or just like, hey, I've added all of this that really fleshed out this specific profession. That's like really cool stuff. So there's kind of two things that, I guess 3 things left, I think. As Armored was pointing out in way earlier on in this whole thing, fish recipes. What on earth are we doing with fish? We have all of this amazing new fish stuff that we got, but we can't use it for anything. What are we gonna do? Well, I'd like to tell you we added 45 new fish recipes in terms of like new foods and whatnot. However, our art team at the moment is completely overloaded, and they have like a huge backlog of things that have planned and being whatnot. So what I am adding is I'm adding recipes for some alternative recipes for the as Crystallized pointed out here with fish oil for cooking. So you'll have a cooking oil recipe from fish meat as refinement. You are looking at we were also thinking about whether or not we wanted to have a version of it for infused oil, as kind of like a fish oil thing, as like you kind of have as cooking condiment in more Southeast Asia areas. Fish traps are ridiculous. They need to be baited with vegetables or something. I don't know. Have you seen crab pots in real life? Granted, they can chuck in like a piece of fish meat, and then they just self-fuel themselves. Those freaking critters are vicious. Endless free fish is game breaking. Yeah, the fish traps and crab pots are they're under revisement. The fishing trawler has the benefit of being able to be adjusted based on decay from the nets. So you can have that repair cost component to it. It also has fuel cost to driving and so on. So that'll be tweaked. As well as a player time component to it. That the traps just doesn't. So what's likely to happen is that the traps might get tuned down significantly again. Just to be like, we still want them to be a sort of passive income, but not to the point where you can feed half the server with just dropping out like 50 of them in the ocean. What do you think about a maintenance system in general for world obbies? I like it. It's likely gonna happen at some point. How quickly that might happen depends a little bit on how crazily things get with some of the scheduling. We got a lot of things planned, and unfortunately not infinite time to do it on. Fish traps and crab pots are nice, but I wouldn't call them game breaking. Just make them be only able to be used on deeded land. It's an interesting... That is also an interesting suggestion. I wouldn't mind that, but it you know... yeah. Like I said, it's a bit of a subject to debate, discuss, and be a bit more analytic on. And it's also hard to tell because 10.0 has also not been out for a long time, so there's still a big discrepancy in some of the values for these things. People spam them, and that's why they're OP to some servers. Yeah. It's definitely things. Mortgage posts, I'll probably take a look at mortgage posts. The reason why I made them be requiring property to be used is to make sure you don't get into a position of because of how the auth system works and how absolute it is. We kind of didn't want to end up in a problem where someone would rope up their boat and connect it to a mortgage post, and then someone claims the mortgage post, and then you're stuck and you can't get your boat off. And a few other kind of edge cases like that. But we definitely take any feedback on that, and so on. Fertilizer recipe from fish is also a good idea. Like river soil and so on boats have auth already. What's the point of the mortgage posts? To be able to freeze them. So when you have them connected to a mortgage post, they're frozen and like physically cannot be moved, so you can't grief and like kind of push out the boat out into the ocean so someone can't recover it, or you know, they have to chase down someone else that has a boat to be able to get to theirs. Would it be possible to have diving gear for hunters to more easily collect clams and urchins? It's actually something that the art team was looking at. Nothing yet been done to it, but it's on the post board for things that we'd like to get in. Never had my boat moved. Should be able to just bump around them. Like it's on water. They don't really have friction as other vehicles. So you can just kind of bump them around if you really wanted to. Which is part of why the mortgage post kind of came into it. So, with that kind of wrapped up, let's grab where did one of the links I actually forgot to grab. Let me just do this. So some people have already seen it. And I'm gonna... There's two things left we'll kind of go over on the stream here. One of them is the new feature that we were talking about. Or, you know, not talked about, I guess. And I know some people are going to be ecstatic, some people are just going to go, eh. And some people are also going to go, oh, but there's already quadrillion mods for it. And that is this thing. Helicopter time. So, oh well, I guess that's cool too. I'm sorry, Armored. Yeah, so the test game was hinting a little bit out about it on the TLS server, and kind of shuffling around it. There's an open PR, so anyone that has dev tier can kind of dig in and see what's going on. So there's two parts of this, and one of them is obviously, as you can see, the whole idea and notion of blocks that is paintable. And the second part of it is we're also looking at what was teased about in the very ancient now 9.0 title screen menu. So there's a few things that's planned for. Now, some of this is planned to go into 10.2, but it is also not entirely sure it'll make it in 10.2. So there's, so, you know, if we're skid steers riding in the back of trucks, let's fix the barges first before we start venturing into truck inception land. But yeah, so basically here is, and as an answer to that binary, no, it's going to be an all or nothing thing. Now, how much of it would be moddable if you can go over, like, block certain targeted entities to be painted? That's probably possible in what will be the paint interaction itself. Basically just look at what's being raycast and then block that specific entity if it's the block type of this. So this will be painting / tinting, if you'd rather use that phrase. Painting white lines on ramps. Let's one step at a time, Elmay. One step at a time. Baby steps. Yeah, see? Jordan pops in and goes, ooh, I've already thought of that. It's already done. And also, hello, Jordan. How are you doing? Nice to see you on stream as well. Shots fired. So the general idea here is that questionably quality mods in. So the purpose with this is to allow users to be able to directly paint the blocks without any kind of like the variations of this particular type of gameplay mod that is available, either being polychrome or the EM Artistry stuff, or some of the others that you're probably familiar with if you've been looking into moddable blocks in general. So the principle here is that you're going to be having a tool used for painting these things. You select the color that you're painting, and then you're applying the paint depending on the tier of the tool. It will behave a little bit like the hammer in terms of whatnot. You'd have interaction for removing paint, adding paint, as well as using different types of fill types to be able to quickly paint stuff. So this means that you are still going to be using your basic hewn block to build stuff, and then you can alternatively change the color of these blocks by just painting on them in the game. As for the world objects, it's still being a bit discussed about how we want this particular interaction to happen, because it is going to be, so this is going to be like vehicles, it's going to be world objects. I wonder if I didn't have a GIF here somewhere with, thought Toby had something somewhere, but I think I may have misplaced it. Yeah, it's somewhere. So the world object is going to be having basically 3 points of interest for them. So you'll have primary area, secondary, and auxiliary. So you can have like the main cabin is one color, and then you have like the frame is one color, and then the border in the middle is another color. And then you would basically decide on what colors these are going to be looking at, similar to how you color your clothing. But some of these functionalities as to how the actual interaction happens is still kind of on the drawing board of what we need. However, Jordan has, like, most of the backend tech is done and sorted, so that, you know, it works. I will say my one concern with paint is players favoring one kind of building block because it looks the best painted. It is very true. It is quite possible that people were like, "Ooh, I'm never doing lumber again because I want my fancy black bricks." That is absolutely true. But that is also something that we kind of have to ignore being a potential problem, because otherwise, you know, with omiss of adding something that is essentially just creative fun, in the favor of maybe someone gets a skewed interest in only wanting to build with one type, which would then only leave business for the pottery guy. Pure Ashlar supremacy. I mean, people build buildings in crazy colors as it is right now in real life. Like they'll do obnoxiously green colored buildings just for the sake of it, or whatever. I mean, you even have like regions and areas where like the actual government will get involved in, you can't paint your house this color because it's in you know, a cultural zone for older buildings or whatnot, and like antique things. Alpenglow, for any of the kind of modding interaction for this mechanic, just drop them to the test game. And as it stands right now, it's limited to, I think we have, it was 40 colors at the moment that's mapped. Make a building tier only have full values if they mix building materials. Yeah, but that's also kind of an artificial requirement, with suddenly forcing people to have floor in lumber, and you know, if I wanted to have all my walls in bricks, I shouldn't need to place, you know, 20 blocks in a cube in the middle of the room just so I can have that brick walls. But yes, you know, there's all kinds of ideas kind of floating around, but it is, yeah, the entire building idea is artificial. That is very true. It is very true. No, but it's kind of within the curfew of the general aesthetics of the game, and trying to add as much creativity to it, without hampering or being directly involving progression and so on. So this is, you know, on kind of building on the whole camera thing. While the camera has paintings and all, or the easel and camera has paintings and things that's kind of coming out of it, Ah, see, there we go. Jordan dug it up. So the different channels for world objects that you can select and differentiate in terms of colors and so on. So this would be set up on the individual vehicles for what parts is colorable in which thing. But yes, it's a lot of that, adding more depth to the game in terms of giving more creativity, without just directly being like another layer of progression, do this and grind the whole bunch of things. So that is another thing that is pictures nerd so much it took a week to make a country to get 60 culture. Yeah, and that's the whole culture value is something that we're continuously looking at and tweaking. As we saw with the initial kind of explosion of it, as well as the annexation changes. With 10.2, we're also adding an injunction feature for it, so you can overrule, as the higher tier settlement, you can overrule certain laws to be able to kind of get rid of malicious things, but also go, hey, you know, we're all voting on this to be used instead. You can't be paying people extra for X, Y, Z. So there's a few things in there that is also getting some touch-ups, as well as some new settings and so on. We definitely need more vehicles, like a steam front loader and logging vehicle. Yeah, so there is a few things that is cooking in that mid-tier mechanics era, but they're not ready for 10.2, so I'm kind of omitting them, but they are in the works. Upgrading hewn logs into higher tier hewn block materials if we like the aesthetics and want to go for a specific style. It's something that we have been talking about, whether or not we want to have some type of artificial furniture or way to kind of increase the room tier without kind of being super artificial in a way. Like it kind of needs to make sense from a gameplay perspective. So you know, it's a topic that we're looking at. Yeah, that object we call armored helicopter. That would kind of funny. Can you tell us what else? Tell us about what else will be contributing outside of art and photography. I'm guessing you're talking about the culture thing. There are a few other things outside of that is they're being tinkered with, but there's a lot of optimization concerns with it, so it's not ready yet. But there are some things in the pipeline that is in the process of getting in there. But we'll go over that once we have more of a direct hard thing to kind of showcase and see and kind of display of like, hey, this is how it's going to work. But there are more things than just the paintings and things that are planned for culture specifically. Oh yeah, see, there we go. I think they're fine. Let's just drop them in there as well. So there's Jordan was doing, when he was testing out and kind of tinkering around with the colorization. We got some, go from the start here. We've got some other, some different material use for different colors. And see like how the ashlar is looking in different either either cube brick form as well as corrugated steel, and so on. So there's, you know, there's a fair bit of color. Yikes, that's a lot of colors. So there's a few in here. We got corrugated steel with the road thing. Can be made to look quite nice. It's the basic block, and then you paint them after the fact. You're not actually crafting a specific type of block. So it'll be like the way you have the hammer to actually build block forms, but instead of selecting block forms, you select color, and then you paint on the blocks in the world. Will there be an ability to paint only one side of a block? Probably not. Will the colors show on the map? Can we do proper pixel art? I haven't actually been on the branch with this stuff added, so I honestly can't answer that, but maybe Jordan can. I'm not entirely sure if it does affect minimap color selection, or if that's read from the base block material. He might have an answer to it. He might also not entirely be sure, or if he's actually checked it. So for resource cost, and this is something that, you know, feel free to drop comment and whatnot. There is a planned resource cost for actually using it, kind of like ammunition and so on. And we've bounced back and forth between multiple types of resource costs and or generic costs and so on and so forth. But it will be something that you are gonna be processing and turning into paint. Ammunition confirmed. I think even the bow is using like ammunition as a variable name somewhere in the code. Paintball confirmed. Got to keep the threads on those models. Yeah, so the whole colorization is basically you use the paint gun and you select the paint and you paint it. So that's, you know, that's a huge thing that I still want player hitboxes. We can mod in things like Nerf guns. Oh god, let's not go there, please. But yeah, so paintings and you know, going from the easel and kind of the artistry thing, and then going into giving a bit more leeway in creativity with blocks and vehicle and so on. Any ideas for bulk deconstruction? It's an open subject. No, it's whole like mass deconstruction thing is something that we've talked a little about, and hasn't really been anything decided on. A crane wrecking ball, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Just like swoosh back and forth, and building is gone. It'd be interesting. No, so we have, and this is on the subject of a bit on the culture things. Culture, or the printing press, rather, is the printing press and its ability to kind of copy paste existing paintings and photography. As well as kind of the whole culture generation thing. So I've been looking at it from a balance perspective, like, you know, completely kind of ignoring the general gameplay implications and whatnot. First off, and just like looking at the sheer economical impact on it, with someone being able to just grab a picture, which is consuming a camera film item, or depending on if it's a tripod or if it's paint. And then once they've done that, they can just run it through a printing press and just make infinite copies with just paper, which is really cheap, really ridiculous, and a bit silly. So one of the things that I was looking at doing is introducing ink as a separate resource, or ingredient. So it would be something that is manufactured by paper milling. And then together with, so ink would be a mixture of probably oil and charcoal, combined with paper to create a paper supplies or printing supplies item. And that would be your consumable item for the printing press. To kind of offset that, we don't want a cheaper material or a cheaper way to get a copy of the same thing, instead of just use more paints versus just ridiculously cheap paper. And at the same time, we also didn't want to just make the cost have like, ooh, print a piece of a picture, and then suddenly you need 400 units of paper to do that. Question: why do fiddleheads get 4 times as heavy when you shard them? Probably need to take a look at the weight ratios between shard versus raw, because I kind of went through a lot of the weights for the raw products, but I think I forgot to actually look at the shard ones. Printing cost depending on its culture. That would kind of take away the general, like the what do you want to call it? The kind of take away the worth and the logic behind printing. We were talking about having like a negative modifier for like, this is a copy of an original piece of art, so it's worth less inherently. But there's some pretty good discussions and things floating around in the chat here. I like it. A newspaper when? Who knows? Who knows? Is something like wallpaper flooring planned to decorate the insides of your brick / wall house? We were looking at it a little bit while or I was looking at it a little bit while they were working on the paint things, and it's tricky to do in the way the block sets work. And kind of like how the core system behaves. Like we have some curtains and block set for curtains in it. That is kind of decorative things that aren't impacting your housing score and so on. But it's rather technically difficult in terms of being able to apply what would essentially take up that tile space and then be able to have other types of world objects. You'd kind of be very weirdly limiting your room in a way with something like that. Exhaustion is just another time gate though, isn't it? It sort of is. And as was it? Twitch chat is for people on YouTube. Twitch chat is going crazy on the exhaustion feature at the moment in terms of gameplay balance. Yeah, Tegan points out that the Exhaustion module as is isn't as usable. It's something that we're looking into the whole Exhaustion functionality as is, and Monsoon has been an absolute freaking stellar champion at giving a huge rundown over things that have been working for their server, and what hasn't been working and what he's done to it to change it and tweak it. So there's a lot of feedback in there that we're taking very seriously, and hey, I'm a champion. That we are definitely going through it, and changing some of the things, and adjusting and increasing the amount of kind of settings and customizability you have for it. To kind of clean it up a little bit, make it more usable. My first decree is free pineapples for everyone. Pineapples are delicious. It's just the way it is. Can we get upgraded versions of storage chests? Possibly, probably, perhaps. It's my favorite answer to that. No, storage options in general is something that we're also kind of... It's a little bit difficult in terms of our current UI for it. Like we've seen issues with this with just the simple things as like the stockpiles in like the lumber stockpiles, where things get kind of escalated storage wise, and the silos and so on. So something that is inherently like an improved chest but doesn't take a lot of these items might be something that we look into. Bookshelves are kind of speculative to like only store like papers and books and things. Like storage racks that would only take handheldable kind of items and so on would be something to look at. But we're also kind of looking at the whole storage system in its entirety, as well as the UI for it, and if there's any improvements we can do there to kind of make it easier to navigate it, easier to kind of search for things, and kind of without going too crazily into filtration systems or automatic filtration systems, if you will. So new crops would open all new cans of worms for balancing. Make fuel for coal-powered things its own tab, please. Yeah, and that's also things that we're looking into for the storage, like be able to filter out and like a checkbox for show fuel compartments, or like hide empty storages and so on and so forth. So there's a couple of ideas back and forth there that we're looking at. So whenever we're trying to tackle a specific part, either being it by adding a new object for a crafting profession, or changing out something in a UI and so on, we're always looking at what can we do to make this better, or what other functionalities does this need to be tied into to make more sense. So there's a lot of things in there that are just innately happening as we kind of go along and improve different areas. Okay, Jen, start from the top. Okay, let's restart the stream. Rewind. Now the whole smelting tech 2 thing. My advice: catch up on the stream once it gets pushed onto YouTube, since that'll happen later on. Once the stream is wrapped up, we're coming up on almost 2 hours. Holy crap! How did this happen? Hey, I just got here. What about this stream? What's going on? Adding iron bars, sleds out of clay. No, but so, you know, there's a whole slew of things that we can do and kind of mitigate, tweak, and fiddle around with as we tinker on them and as we improve them. And that's stuff that like detention, Mr. Potter, coming on with, like add options to sort linked stockpiles alphabetically and a whole bunch of that. And things like that is what we look at when we're kind of touching a UI in that. We're gonna talk about shipwright profession too. Shipwright just being a dead end job. Shipwright will make a little bit more sense as we talked about maintenance and so on. Needing to kind of replace hull planks and so forth seems to be a sensible thing. Or replacing, you know, rudders and so on. What ifs, perhaps, maybe. Will there be more options for tier 2 materials in the future? Ooh, it's a difficult subject. A new building block will be making its introduction in a future update, not 10.2, but the Adobe block that we teased a little bit about before is it'll eventually creep its way in, which will nuke hewn/mortared stone early on. And it's still a little bit undecided about what we want to do with the tiers, if that's thing. Adobe would be an actual starter block thing, so it would be a non-specific craftable one. So it would basically be like tier 0/1 as a replacement for the current like shitty version of hewn log and shitty version of mason and mortared stone. The hewn and mortared stone would be explicitly only craftable by those professions. The Adobe's just concept art at the moment. Rob is still very much working on them, so I don't wanna kind of ruin the surprise. Hamster wheel, oxygen not included style. Yeah, have the player keep running in a wheel to generate power. That'd be fun. But yeah, no, it's looking pretty fun. It's, you know, as said, we got a lot of things planned. We got a lot of things rolling. There's a lot of irons in the fire. Any plans to let us capture animals and enslave them to do work for us? We'll see what happens with the animal husbandry thing. That's, you know, also a drafted planned thing. So a lot of fun. Servers sometimes die out. Is there any solution plan for engaging the players a lot more to the game? It's part of why things like the painting stuff is being implemented. Just generally adding a lot more of it, a lot more activities to do that isn't directly tied to pew pew shoot on laser. Just to kind of keep. I want to capture my local smelter to repair my tools on the run. You guys are just crazy. Let's at least stick to capturing and taming animals and not your local smelter, please. Yeah, just keep it reined in a little bit. Oh, the cats are doing fine. They are absolute marauders, but they're doing fine. No, but it's kind of running out of things to say for this specific stream without going into too much of other upcoming stuff. The background image in the web camera is from our build on Eco World when we ran a monsoon. What was it? 9.7 run, I think. Yeah. Yeah, no. So this is that is the build that we The composite lumber factory that I built. Yeah, the web camera, the background image in the web camera was from the eco world that we did the stream tour thing. So there is actually a there's a dev stream touring eco world somewhere on the YouTube that drives by this place. Yeah, I think it was 9.7. 9.6 or 9.7. I can't entirely remember, but it's one of the two. But yeah, so there is a stream where we're driving by this place. So that's on Monsoons and their guys' server. Proof that I actually played the game. Woohoo! Magic, really. No, but it's been a blast, you guys. Kind of wrapping up the stream. It's went on for way longer than planned. Yeah, the hedges are from Kai's mod, I think. More building shapes planned. There are some in the pipeworks. There's more. There's block sets in the pipeworks. There's, like I said, the art team is absolutely overloaded. Yeah, ERC hedges. Thank you. There's a lot of things that are cooking. There's a lot of fun things that are brewing, and yeah, you know, stick around. Keep your nose directed into the Discord, and you'll probably find more information, and keep up to date with all the news, and we'll probably roll out another stream before 10.2 hits anywhere, and kind of break down a little bit and see more gameplay interaction with some of these things. A sub-specialty could be drinks, nothing to drink. Yeah, no, it's food things is kind of difficult, but yeah, you know, keep your ears peeled, and I will catch you on another stream. Hope you've had a good time here tonight, and wish you a great weekend for the rest of it. Yeah, take it easy, take care, and have a great weekend.